Hello and welcome to volume 45 of Ask a Brit. This is the show, of course, in which I ask you fine people to ask me anything you like, so long as you use the hashtag AskABrit, and so long as you use the theme that was laid out in the last Ask a Brit video, and in this case, that was films. Stay tuned until the end of this episode to find out the topic for next week's episode. Okay, alright, subject of films, let's get going. We had a couple of questions come in about classic movies, and one of those came from Jerome McKenna, who asked, do you have a favourite British film that was made before 1916? If so, what is it? I think to this day it's Brief Encounter, which was a film, David Lean, I believe, directed it, and it's a romantic film about a woman who has an affair. Right, and it's made at a time, of course, when that was highly frowned upon. I mean, it still is, of course, but it was not looked in good light at all. But the film somehow, makes you sympathise with not just her, not just the person she's having an affair with, but her husband as well. You kind of feel sorry for everybody in the entire situation. Everybody should see it. It's beautiful. There's a lot of instances of people going, "Oh, darling," and all of that, like they do it used to do in the old days. Which is quaint, I suppose, if nothing else. And the next question comes from Jeff Lichtman, who similarly asks, you've already told us about some of your favourite movies from when you were a child, but how about classic movies? What films do you like from before, say, 1980? It's scary that films from before 1980 are now considered classics, firstly. But what old movie stars and what directors, Jeff asks. From before 1980, well, I mean, Star Wars is before 1980, so that's right there, probably my favourite of all time before then. But so many films. So The Wizard of Oz, Sound of Music, as I said, Brief Encounter, Psycho, Mr. Alfred Hitchcock, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Superman the movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and then going right back, we watched recently a few Charlie Chaplin films that I'm into. I'm getting into silent films. Sometimes silence is best.
Oh my gosh.
See? Favourite movie stars and directors, Steven Spielberg for one, probably my favourite film director of all time, but also Alfred Hitchcock, at least for Psycho, although it turns out he might have been a little bit of a shit to people, and David Lean as well. So some of my favourite directors there. As for movie stars from before 1980, rather partial to Humphrey Bogart, and in fact a film I didn't mention just now is Casablanca. It's bloody good, isn't it? I hadn't seen, believe it or not, I hadn't seen Casablanca until about 2 years ago, and we decided to sit down and watch it, and it's bloody amazing. I think it's my favourite old film ever, black and white, and Humphrey Bogart is a pissing amazing in it. Okay, and the next question comes from Joe Cool. Joe Cool asks, will you see the release of 2001 A Space Odyssey in Chicago next month? I should point out, of course, the very theme for this Ask a Brit video is based on the fact that today is the 50th anniversary of the release of 2001 A Space Odyssey, a film which, sinfully, I've seen only once, and again, that was a few years ago. Good film, tripped out ending. But it was nice, and of course it was directed by Mr. Stanley Kubrick, which is a director I somehow neglected to mention in the last question as being one of my favourite directors, at least sort of during a time period when he directed 2001. Also Dr. Strangelove. I forgot Dr. Strangelove. I was in a stage version of Dr. Strangelove years ago, and we watched the film as a group, and that became one of my favourite films, or at least satires, of all time as well. How did I forget these films when I was listing them? I was under pressure. But Joe Cool asks, will I be seeing the re-release of 2001 A Space Odyssey in Chicago next month? They're showing it here in the city. So yes is the answer, right?
Probably.
Probably. Is it free? Oh, Joe Cool isn't actually here to answer that. So. If it's free, yes, I will definitely go and do that.
If not, we'll probably be seeing Solo.
So, well, we can do both. But yes, Solo, a Star Wars story, comes out next month. Looking forward to that. And speaking of film franchises, so that's my transition into the next. Okay, so franchises. As you can see, I do like my franchise films. Back to the Future and Indiana Jones behind me. Blockbuster video. That was American Beauty. with Kevin Spacey. So can't bring myself to watch it anymore. And then a few others there. But in terms of franchises, well, we have a question actually here that pertains to a very famous British franchise. In the spirit of stereotypes, do you have a favourite James Bond? If so, which one and why? I think it's Timothy Dalton. Doesn't get enough credit. No, leave me alone. Leave it back up, right? Timothy Dalton he only did 2 films, but my goodness, he's the best.
I don't know anything about him.
You don't. She's never heard of Timothy Dalton.
No, I have.
Okay.
I've just never seen any of his films.
He is, for me, he's. I side with the underdog. And he's the underdog when it comes, because everybody hated his films, License to Kill and Living Daylights. I have a partiality for them because when I was a kid, they came out actually in the late 80s. So it all goes
back to nostalgia.
It's nostalgia. That's why I like Mr. Timothy Dalton. Plus, he's Welsh, like other good Welsh people. I'm just trying to make a reference to Welsh people because apparently I focus too much on the English aspect of Britain. So Sean Connery, great Scotsman, and Pierce Brosnan, the greatest Irishman that ever was. Okay, next question comes from Pips K, and Pips K asks, I'm a fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, books and films. What is your take on the films? Did you believe they did the masterpiece, which is the novel, justice? I couldn't tell you in all honesty. I only got about 10 pages in to the first Lord of the Rings book and put it down. It's not that I thought it was awful. I found it hard to get into the language of it at first. I'll have to give it another chance, but the films, I think the films do the films an incredible justice. I'm not sure there's a more marvelously made trilogy, and I include Star Wars in that as well. I think the attention to detail in The Lord of the Rings and the storytelling just in general is pretty breathtaking, as is the scenery, of course, from my homeland of New Zealand. It's not my homeland, but again, I have to get references to other English-speaking countries in there because I'm told
Canada?
often, not Canada, I'm often told that I don't do it often enough. So here we go. There's a reference. Peter Jackson, what a great director. Probably the greatest director from New Zealand of all time, I would say.
Mike Myers was from Canada.
Mike Myers was a murderer in the films, the Halloween films. You mean Austin Powers actor. He's British, in a way. We accept Mike Myers as British. But no, I love the Lord of the Rings films, and Tara disagrees with me on the ending to Return of the King, which I think is splendid in that there are 10 of them, not 10 Return of the Kings, 10 endings to Return of the King. You think it goes on too long. I think you go on too long. You might think I go on too long. I don't know. But
I
no.
can agree with you there.
Shh. I like Lord of the Rings. And finally, from, I think this is pronounced Kinged Win Poop. So I think you only named yourself that so that I would have to say it on air. But Kinged Win Poop, I did it again, asks, what do you think of Star Wars being seen as an American film in the US and a British film in the UK? I don't think it's really seen as a British film in the UK. I know where you're coming from because much of it's filmed, of course, in London. There's a lot of British bad guys in Star Wars. We'll get to that in a moment. But, actually, there's also a lot of British good guys. You've got Rey, you've got Obi-Wan, you've got, right through to all the others. Han is American. So it doesn't really matter, though, does it? They're in another galaxy. So at this point, their accent is almost meaningless in a way. But speaking of British versus American differences when it comes to films, that brings us on to our final section. So Catherine Billiard asks, which films do you prefer, British or American? I'm not really sure that I could state a preference for one country either way when it comes to films. Because, as you heard in this entire video so far, I have favourite films from both countries. I think that each country has a different approach to successful filmmaking. In fact, we have a question on that. Both countries have different ways of making films, or at least successful films. Successful films for us, they're things like Love Actually, that aren't necessarily big special effects laden films, but ones that tell a unique or a romantic or an interesting story around characters. I think we build our films more around the characters and plot whereas American films, the big selling ones I'm talking about, tend to rely on heavy action and CGI and all of that. And of course, I'm sure there's an attention somewhat to character and storyline, but it tends to go by the wayside when it comes to marketing that particular film. Philip Ellis asks, you said questions about film, so do you suffer any confusion over there with saying film rather than movie? I don't. I mean, I think I've always known what a movie is. Obviously, I grew up with American films, or movies, or flicks. And because of that, you become very familiar with terms like that. I don't think there's an English person alive that wouldn't know what a movie is, and I venture vice versa, although it's been pointed out to me by Tara that a film here might be seen more as high art than a movie, which might be seen more in that sort of popcorn thriller type way. But yeah, no, I've never encountered anybody that would be confused about either. Kirsten Wright, for those movies where the UK and US titles are different, like the first Harry Potter movie / book, which title do you say more, and does it ever change based on who you're talking to? I don't know, actually. I'm not sure, because to this day I can't remember which is which over the Harry Potter ones. It's the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone. What's the American version?
The Sorcerer's Stone, and the Philosopher's Stone is the UK version.
Okay. I didn't even know. So I guess I don't retain the information a lot of the time. Although it does make me think about this one little story about a film I referenced earlier. One of the great Bond films of our time, License to Kill. Was initially, I think, going to be called License Revoked, but it didn't pass test screenings here in America because that tends to mean having your driver's license revoked. Of course, Bond, this was referring to his license to kill people as an agent, so it wouldn't have carried the same message. But I haven't really ever gone around calling it that here in the US. Maybe I should start, though. When people ask me my favourite Bond film, it's License Revoked. My license to comment on films will be revoked after this video, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, and the next question comes from Jay Joy. That's the greatest name ever. That's YouTube name of the week, and it makes me very happy. It also makes me happy to read Jay Joy's question, which is, what's your opinion about Disney villains with upper-class British accents when the heroes have American accents? It's discrimination on a level I can't even begin to... I'm kidding, I love it. I'd love to play, I genuinely would love to play an evil British baddie in any film that you'll throw at me. Anything, not porn, but anything that is commissioned by Hollywood, I'll do it. Free, I'll do it for free. So not free, you'll have to pay me. And specifically, it'd be best if it's Star Wars, which is a Disney film technically. But as I said earlier on, a lot of the henchmen in the First Order are British. But you're right, there are some evil baddies in famous Disney films that are just British. Hunchback. I don't know why it is. I mean, I think that there's this sense that we intimidate you. Do I intimidate you? It's often been said that I don't at all. So I'm not sure that I would really work for the part. But I don't know. Maybe it's that perceived intelligence that we have, or that authority that we have.
Or your sniveliness.
Sniveliness? What are you You're not referring you're just referring to the British people in general, not me.
British baddies.
Right, okay. Well, good. So I think it's good, and I would love to partake myself. And our final question of the day comes from BJS301. What is the biggest difference between a great British film and a great American film?
I think just the style of storytelling is generally different.
I think it's the style of storytelling that's a little bit different.
Wow. You're something, aren't you?
Well, it's hard to say. Put it this way. I think that British films are often constrained, at least in terms of American films, of how much they can spend on a film. They're constrained by their budget, so often they have to appeal more to the senses in people that are interested in characters and interested in plot and script and all of that. That's not to say, though, that great American films don't have that also. Some of the greatest American films are based on books. I mean, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, again, one of my favourite films of all time. It's also a magnificent book. It's also a play. I was in it years ago. But then again, that's true of Britain. This is it. Great British films have Judi Dench in them, and somebody asked me, why is it that British actors just seem to have this higher amount of gravitas when they're on a film? I think it's because there are a higher concentration of British actors that have a very formal theatrical background. They were taught on the stage, and a lot of the sort of big American film stars like your Brad Pitts, your Harrison Fords and all of that, they didn't necessarily get their background on the stage, or at least not in a formal sense, and they were chosen more for their chiseled looks or whatever it might be. There are some notable exceptions, like Meryl Streep and Robert De Niro, etc., etc. But more and more in recent time, they've gone for aesthetic in the US rather than those that were sort of trained theatrically. Whereas in Britain, that's sort of continued to happen. Some of your favourite stars like David Tennant, etc., etc., have a strong theatrical background, and that I hope won't change anytime soon. I answered the question in a way I wasn't expecting to, so I'm glad. But anyway, that's it for this episode of Ask a Brit. Join us next week for volume 46 when we discuss British slang. So get your questions in right now about British slang. Don't forget to use the hashtag #AskABrit, and I'll see you next week. All right, bye. Thank you for watching this episode of Ask a Brit. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and if you'd like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.